from the heart of the Roman Empire, at the height of its power. I uttered a proclamation that shattered the Roman mind. Call me not Lord, for I am a lady. This is my story, the story of Elagabalus, the emperor who lived as a woman. My 4-year reign was a whirlwind of religious upheaval and gender rebellion that ended in one of the most vicious assassinations in Roman history. An assassination plotted by my own family. So, how did a teenage priest from Syria end up as the Empress of Rome? And why was there such a desperate effort to scrub me from the history books? My story doesn't begin in Rome, but in the Syrian province of Emesa. It's 217 AD, and the notoriously cruel Emperor Caracalla has just been assassinated. The throne is snatched by his praetorian prefect, Macrinus, who right away makes a huge mistake. He exiles the remaining and very powerful women of the previous dynasty. One of them was Julia Misa, my ambitious and ruthless grandmother. From her new home in Syria, my grandmother started to spin a story that would change the course of the empire. She let a rumor slip that I, her handsome, charismatic 14-year-old grandson, a high priest for the Syrian sun god, Elagabalus was secretly the illegitimate son of the beloved and now murdered Emperor Caracalla. For the Roman legions in the east, who were still loyal to Caracalla, this was bombshell news. That, combined with Misa's promises of a massive payday, was all it took. The soldiers swore allegiance to me, the boy they now believed was their rightful heir. Macrinus, the new emperor, completely underestimated the threat. He thought the rebellion was nothing. That was a fatal miscalculation. His own troops started killing their officers and deserting to join me in the spring of 218 AD. After a decisive battle, Macrinus was caught and executed. At just 14, I, the high priest from Emesa, was declared Emperor of Rome. The world would soon know me by the name of my god, Elagabalus. So, what happens when you give a teenager like me absolute power? A teen with zero regard for Roman tradition and a burning desire to remake the world. You get chaos. My journey to Rome was long, but my reputation arrived long before I did. By the time I got there, the city was bracing for a ruler unlike anyone they had ever known. My reign wasn't just a series of policies. It was an all-out war on Roman identity itself. First, the religious revolution. Rome had its pantheon, with Jupiter as king. I wasn't having it. I planned to replace Jupiter with my own god, Elagabalus. I had the physical symbol of my god, a conical black meteorite brought all the way from Syria, and built a massive, lavish temple for it right on the Palatine Hill, the very heart of Rome. Roman senators were forced to watch and participate in what they saw as bizarre, foreign rituals led by me in silk robes and makeup. And to top it all off, I arranged a divine marriage between my stone god and Urania, the patron goddess of Carthage, Rome's ancient and most hated enemy. For the deeply traditional Roman elite, this wasn't just odd. It was an unforgivable insult to their ancestors and their entire way of life. But the religious drama was only half of it. The real scandal of my reign was my profound and very public rebellion against gender norms. I openly and consistently identified as a woman. I regularly wore wigs, makeup, and women's clothing, and insisted on being called Lady Domina instead of Lord Dominus. When a courtier greeted me with my Lord Emperor, I replied, "Call me not Lord, for I am a lady. This wasn't a private affair." I married 5 times. My first wife was a noblewoman named Julia Cornelia Paula, but she was soon divorced. My most scandalous marriage to a woman was to Aquilia Severa, a Vestal virgin. Vestals were priestesses sworn to 30 years of absolute chastity. For one to break that vow was a capital crime. For the emperor herself to cause it to be broken was a sacrilege that horrified the city. But my most significant marriage was to a man, a handsome chariot driver, and former slave named Hierocles. In that relationship, I was the wife. I loved being called Hierocles' mistress, his wife, and his queen. This wasn't just bending gender roles, it was shattering the Roman idea of masculine authority, which demanded the emperor be the ultimate dominant male figure. And then there was what might be the most shocking detail of all. I offered huge sums of money to any doctor who could perform what you would now call gender-affirming surgery by constructing a vagina for me. Nearly 2,000 years before such a procedure was medically possible. A Roman emperor was desperately seeking one. On top of this, my reign was a spectacle of excess. Legend claims I held banquets where guests were smothered by a cascade of rose petals, dropped from a false ceiling. More historically grounded are the accounts of me appointing my lovers and favorites to the highest offices in the land, supposedly based on the size of their genitals rather than their experience. An emperor in Rome could be cruel, they could be incompetent. But what they couldn't be was a disgrace to the army and their own family. I managed to be both. My own grandmother, Julia Misa, the woman who had engineered my rise to power, saw the writing on the wall. The soldiers were disgusted by my feminine behavior, and the Senate was completely alienated. I had become a threat to the dynasty she had worked so hard to restore. So, the master political operator got back to work. Misa began promoting her other grandson, the quiet and traditionally Roman-looking Alexander Severus, as the stable, sensible alternative. She talked me into adopting my own cousin as my heir, a decision I almost immediately regretted. Paranoid and jealous of Alexander's growing popularity with the troops, I tried to have him killed several times. Every attempt failed and only made the Praetorian Guard the elite soldiers, who were supposed to be my bodyguards, even angrier. They saw Alexander as their future and me as an embarrassment they just couldn't tolerate anymore. The end came on March 11th to 22 AD. The Praetorians mutinied, declaring their full support for Alexander. Then, only 18, I tried to run, hiding in a latrine inside the military camp. It was no use. The soldiers found me cowering with my mother, Julia Soamias, who was clinging to me. They mercilessly cut us down. But our brutal deaths weren't enough. The soldiers and an enraged mob dragged our bodies through the streets of Rome. They beheaded me, the empress who called herself a lady, and threw my body into the river Tiber. Shortly after, the Senate, which I had treated with such contempt, issued a damnatio memoria condemnation of memory. This was an official order to erase a person from history. My name was chiseled off of buildings, my statues were ray-carved or destroyed, and all my religious laws were reversed. They tried to make it as if I never even existed. But, as you can see, they failed. Despite their best efforts to scrub me from history, my story survived. Ironically preserved in the hostile writings of the very senators who hated me. For centuries, I was remembered as nothing more than a caricature of depravity, one of Rome's worst emperors. Today, though, you can see my story in a new light. My insistence on being called lady, my marriage to a man as his wife, and my desperate plea for surgery force you to ask a startling question. Was I just a religious fanatic and a corrupt tyrant? Or was I a figure born into the wrong millennium, a transgender woman who, when given absolute power, dared to live her truth in the most public and defiant way imaginable? My reign reminds us that the fight for identity and the violent backlash against those who defy social norms is anything but a modern invention. What's your take? Was I a monster, a misunderstood ruler, or a revolutionary figure far ahead of my time? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to uncover more of history's most shocking and forgotten stories, make sure to like and subscribe.